Are you bored yet? I am. The international break is slowly killing me. There isn't a great deal of news around, and the stories that are doing the rounds feel a little bit hollow. That doesn't mean, however, we can't have some interesting conversations around them. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Let's get into it. Hope you're all good. Hope you are well. Oh no, I've said it. Hold on a second. What have I done here? I've clicked a YouTube video on my second laptop. Shocking. And I said the thing. For God's sake. Anyway, how you doing? Hope everybody's having a good Thursday so far. It's miserable. It's cloudy. It's wet. It's windy. For those of you that are interested in the London weather, we always seem to start with that. It's a very British thing to do, isn't it? But on today's episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner, it's not going to be the longest episode because, as I say, there isn't much to talk about at the minute. There isn't a lot going around. There's an interview that Bukayo Saka gave to James Benge, which I think is quite interesting. But I'm not just going to sit here and read it to you. So go off and have a look at that. What else can we talk about? We're going to touch on something that's happened at Manchester City over the last few days. In fact, we'll start there. We're also going to talk William Saliba after it emerged that Real Madrid have an interest in the Arsenal defender. I'm going to talk a little bit about why that might not be a problem today, but it could be a big problem tomorrow. We'll also get into how much the centre-half is worth. Plus, England take on Greece, and I'm going to be at Wembley tonight for that one. So we'll kind of very, very loosely preview that as well. And we'll touch on some really, really sad news that came out of the Greek camp yesterday. Let's start with the Manchester City stuff then. Tiki Begiristain, is that how you say it? It's a name that I've never been able to get my head around the pronunciation of, but he is obviously and has been one of the main men at Manchester City for a long, long time. He was put into the position prior to Pep Guardiola's arrival with a view to that happening somewhere down the line. Manchester City, for all the criticism that they get and for all the stick that goes their way because of obviously the case that's ongoing at the minute, they are very, very well run. Now, you can argue about how they got to the point where they could be as dominant as they are, and there's a lot of questions around how they manage that. But what you can't deny is that, yes, of course, with the resources, they are run really, really well. And the Pep Guardiola appointment is probably the greatest example of that, I would say, because what they did was identify that Pep was the guy that they wanted a long time in advance. They put people in place upstairs to kind of make sure that those guys came in, settled down, got their feet under the table, ready for when Pep Guardiola was ready himself to make the move to Manchester City. And Begiristain is one of those people. Now, he's announced that he will be leaving the club at the end of the season. Now, according to the reports, it was always part of the plan for him that once he got into his 60s, he was going to take it sort of year by year. And so no one is massively shocked or surprised by this. But given that Pep Guardiola has yet to commit his future to the football club beyond the rest of this season, given that Begiristain, who's been a massive part of Manchester City's success behind the scenes, has now announced that he's going, and given the fact that we don't know how the 115 case is going to go, a lot of people are kind of putting 2 and 2 together. Perhaps they're coming out with 5 in some cases, but it feels like there's a real reluctance from some of the big figures at Manchester City right now to commit their futures to the football club, which has to be, surely, and this is just my opinion, I don't know this for a fact, but surely it has to be related to the case that's ongoing at the moment. And is this another telltale sign that Manchester City feel they can't win the case? Now, if you remember a few days ago, we talked on the last episode about the Premier League versus Manchester City and the case around associated party transactions. And we talked about the fact that while the Premier League were eager to dress it up as a massive victory for them, it wasn't really that. Nor was it a huge victory for Manchester City. In fact, the truth was probably somewhere in between. But the fact that Manchester City haven't been able to get all of the associated party transaction laws deemed as unlawful does mean that they're going to have to fight this case with the 115. We discussed it on the last show. Had they had proven a lot of those laws to be unlawful, they proved some of it to be unlawful, but a very small part of it. Had they proven it all to be unlawful, then it would have made their fight in the 115 case a lot easier. They haven't managed to do that. But I'm just wondering, and I'm sure a lot of people are wondering this, is the news that Bagiristan's going, is the news, or it's not news, the fact that Pep Guardiola is yet to commit his future, is that a sign of what Manchester City think is coming with regards to this case? We're going to find out in time, but I thought that was an interesting story and worth touching on. Just a quick reminder as well before we dive into the rest of the pod that there is a Patreon pod out now, an In Focus episode looking at Gabriel Jesus specifically. That came out a couple of days ago. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, go back and have a listen. If you're not a patron, why not? Just kidding. It's not compulsory, but I'd love your support. If you could support the pod, want to support the pod, and want access to additional content, go over to patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna. You can sign up there and you can access this bonus episode in which we discuss the initial impact Gabriel Jesus made, the fact that he has unfortunately gone off the boil, what we should be doing to try and get him back to the level that we all know he's capable of, and whether that will be enough. It's a really, really interesting In Focus episode, I think, and I know I'm biased, but please do check it out and let me know what you guys think. I do want to touch on England versus Greece tonight. The game takes place at Wembley this evening. I'm really looking forward to this. I normally can't be bothered to go to England games. I was at the Euros and that was different. Like, that was amazing. To be at the games from the knockout stages all the way through to the final was unreal. Incredible experience, something that will live with me forever. But the reason I normally can't be bothered to go to England games at Wembley is because of Wembley Park Station, if I'm being honest with you. The thought of coming out of a football stadium at like 10:30 and standing in that like mile-long queue through Wembley Way to try and get on a train to go home, it really puts me off. And so it's got to be a game that I really, really want to go to. I kind of needed a bit of a nudge with this one. Like, I wasn't dead set on going. I was kind of on the fence about it, but some friends are going, so we decided that we'd all go together and take it in. Afsar says in the chat, Harry, are you supporting Greece or England? Greece, mate, every single day of the week. But I think it should be interesting. It's a good measure for Greece, I think, because they got a new manager. Things are very, very different in the setup now after narrowly missing out on qualification for the Euros. And it's an opportunity for them to test themselves against a really, really talented England side. Also, you get the opportunity to have another look at Lee Carsley's England, which I think is interesting because we've heard so much talk about his style being sort of dramatically, wildly different to that of Gareth Southgate's. And I think he needs to show that in the coming games, so that hopefully for him, he can turn this into a permanent role. But this game for me, certainly from a Greek perspective, has been overshadowed by some really tragic news that came out last night. Yesterday evening, reports started to emerge from the Greek media saying that George Baldock, a Greek international, wasn't in the squad for this game, mind, but is a Greek international, has played plenty of times for the Greek national team. He had sadly passed away at the age of just 31 years of age. And I don't want to speculate because I think it's horrible to speculate over things like this. But the report did say that he was found in his swimming pool and having passed away, which is a horrible thing. So this shocked a lot of people. It rocked everybody. The Greek team will wear black armbands tonight. There will be tribute paid to him, I'm sure, at Wembley Stadium, because George Baldock has played most of his career in English football as well. A lot of you will remember him from Sheffield United. He took up Greek nationality through his grandmother, I think, and has been a part of the Greek setup for a little while now. But for this news to come out on the eve of a game like that, where, you know, as Greeks, I think people would have been really excited about this game because you get to test yourselves against one of the big boys. You get to play against one of the most talented teams. You get to do it at Wembley Stadium, and obviously there's a there's a huge Greek community in London. So to have that opportunity to go and watch Greece play at close quarters is quite exciting for people. But then this news comes out and it just completely takes the shine off the game now. And I feel a bit deflated about the game as a result of this, because it just goes to show, doesn't it, that this game doesn't really matter. In the grand scheme of life, it doesn't really matter. So rest in peace, George Baldock, and our condolences, of course, to his family and friends who must be really struggling at the moment. Horrible, horrible news. Really difficult time. And hopefully the Greek team, who I don't think have a chance of winning the game tonight, can at least do George Baldock proud with a good performance. Okay, I want to talk William Saliba. Yes, William Saliba. You know that French defender that is probably the best in the world right now, and who is shining bright for Arsenal every single time he takes to the field. He is said to be the subject of interest from Los Blancos, Real Madrid, the biggest club side in the world, and the one club side that I think, no matter how good you are and no matter how good a state things are within your own club, they are the one side, Real Madrid, that can turn someone's head. I've always believed that growing up. I still believe that today. There's something about that football club. There's something about the aura it gives off. And so it doesn't matter if Arsenal are, one of the best teams in England, one of the best teams in Europe right now. It doesn't even matter if you think that Arsenal are a better club side right now than Real Madrid. I'm not saying we are, by the way, but I haven't thought about that. But just making the point that Real Madrid are Real Madrid and they could pull anyone from anywhere. That's the aura and the power that that football club has. They've built that up over years and years and years of being the best in class, but also bringing in the best in class and making good signings for the most part. Turning them into Galacticos, into superstars, etc., etc. Now, I said right at the top of the show that while there are some stories doing the rounds during this international break, a lot of them feel hollow. And this does feel hollow, which is why I said that at the top of the show. This isn't a story that I'm looking at and going, oh, bloody hell, we're going to lose William Saliba soon, and this is a real problem for us. As I said already, it's not today's problem, but it could be tomorrow's problem. And while I don't think that we're in a position now where we need to stress about this or be overly concerned by it, we are at a stage now where we've come through a huge transitional period. There's been a lot of development, positive progress. And we're now at a stage where there is a pressure to win trophies. And it's not just the pressure that comes from the fans or from the media or that the players and the manager put on themselves or from the directors at the football club. It's a pressure that also comes from the players as well. Now, it's a bit different with the players, right? Because they have this in their hands. As a player, you have the ability to affect directly whether or not your team is successful or not. So you can't hide in the way that others can when it comes to this conversation and when it comes to this discussion. But at some point, if Arsenal don't go and win one of the big ones in the next couple of years, some of our world stars, like your Salibas, like your Sakas, and maybe it's a bit different for Saka because he's London born and raised and he's been an Arsenal fan all his life. But there is a world in which some of those players, like William Saliba, who will know, listen, he'll be humble about it, he'll be quiet about it, he'll keep himself to himself, but he knows full well how good he is. He knows that today he's one of, if not the best centre-halves in the world. I would go as far as saying he's the best centre-half in the world. So that link to Real Madrid is a natural link, right? Real Madrid are the biggest, most powerful football club in the world. He's the best defender in the world, in my opinion, right now. Therefore, Real Madrid to Arsenal link makes sense. He's young enough at 23 years of age, and he has a contract that still has long enough to run on it. I think another 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. Whereby, again, this isn't today's problem, but it could be tomorrow's problem. Once you start getting into the final 2 years, the final year, if you haven't signed anything because you are still waiting for the club to get over the line and win one of those major trophies, interest from a club like Real Madrid does become a problem. And as I say, Real Madrid have that ability to pull anyone from anywhere at any given time, and I would never dispute that. So when people say, oh, this is a nonsense, or they say, hands off, you're not getting a hold of William Saliba. Yeah, for now, I agree with you. For now, we're in a great position. And for now, we can fight off that type of interest. But in time, that is going to change, guys. In time, we are probably going to have to worry about the likes of William Saliba moving on if we don't go out and achieve what we all know we're capable of right now, which is winning the big titles. You've got to be doing that. You and I, we grew up loving this football club, supporting this football club. Bukayo Saka grew up loving and adoring this football club. It's going to be a lot more difficult to make it work in my mind or in Bukayo Saka's mind to make me feel or believe, or to make Bukayo Saka feel or believe that Real Madrid is a better place to be than Arsenal. But if you don't have that attachment, if you've grown up in France and have no affiliation with Arsenal Football Club whatsoever until you joined them, had a difficult time at the start of your Arsenal career like William Saliba did, where he thought he was good enough to play, Mikel Arteta thought otherwise, I think in time that's been proven right. But the scars from that will probably still be there in the back of William Saliba's mind somewhere. So what I am trying to say is, yes, right now we're in a good enough position, given his contract, given how well we're playing, to fight this kind of interest off. But don't be naive enough to think that there won't come a point where if we're not winning major trophies, hell, even if we are, because Real Madrid are that attractive, that we're going to have to deal with this head on. And the chances of William Saliba staying at Arsenal for the rest of his career, just based on the way football is generally today, are very, very low. And you've got to accept that, and you've got to understand that. I love the player. I don't want to see him go anywhere. I don't think he'll go anywhere anytime soon, I should say. But this could be a problem in the next couple of years, not just with Saliba, but with others too, if Arsenal don't start winning trophies. So we talk about the pressure to win it from the fans and from all the other people involved and all the other stakeholders. But the pressure is there also and exists also because you can't hold on to great players if you don't do great things. And at Real Madrid, he'll certainly feel that he would have the environment, or be in the environment, whereby all of his wildest dreams are possible because they're serial European Cup winners, serial La Liga winners. Arsenal still have it all to prove. So I'm not saying stress about it, throw your toys out of the pram about it now, but it is a problem that could arise in the not too distant future if things don't go the way we want them to. And I'm just pre-warning you to be mentally prepared for that, because emotionally it will be quite difficult. We've been through it in the past, losing players that we loved and adored because we either didn't have the finances or couldn't match their ambitions on the pitch. So it is a concern to me. Let's take some of your thoughts from the live chat on this. Thibaut says, "Morning, Harry. I think we're in a better place than almost every team, but you can't deny the aura of Real Madrid." I completely agree with that. A. Chatterton says, Saliba will leave one day. No doubt. Let's try and get one more contract out of him and let him go when he's, say, 27 with a PL and CL under his belt. Would leave as a true legend if he achieved that. Yeah, for sure. Eamon Doherty says, hi, if we have to sell Saliba, how much would you ask for? I would not accept a penny less than £150 million for William Saliba right now, because I think he's the best centre-half in world football on current form. I think there are others who probably, in terms of overall, sit above him because of what they've achieved in comparison to the very little that William Saliba's achieved at this stage in his career. But I believe he's got the ability, the talent, and he's shown us at a young age that he's got the capacity to surpass the Van Dijks and those people of this world if he keeps going in this same trajectory. Virgil van Dijk wasn't as good as William Saliba at 23 years old. He wasn't as good at that age, and so there's evidence to suggest, and it is just to suggest because you never know. Some people will develop loads and then hit a bit of a brick wall. Others will be slow, gradual developers. You know, it's different for everybody. But I do feel like with William Saliba, all the evidence points to him only getting better. So for me, he's the best centre-half in the world. Therefore, I would not accept a penny less than £150 million. Let me know what you guys think in the chat as well in terms of prices. Cass says, I mentioned on Tom's show this morning regarding Saliba, I never get attached to any player, although I'm an Arsenal fan, because at some point these players will leave and Saliba will be no different. Gary Griffin says, Harry, I don't see a problem. He's tied to a long-term contract and loves the club. He would cost a world record fee for a centre-back, over 100 million. Historically, they try and wait for players to come to the end of their contracts. They do. It is something they do. But then again, it comes back to that point of it could be tomorrow's problem, because 2027 isn't that far away. In 2027, William Saliba is going to be, 26, maybe going on to 27? And if they're in his ear from now, we could get to a point where we're in the last 2 years of William Saliba's contract and you go, well, he's not signing a new one. And then you think, well, the last thing you want to do is let it run into the final year because you lose all of your bargaining power in the transfer. So then do you try and do a deal at 2 years, but Real Madrid know that you don't want to run the risk of going into the final year and therefore try and lowball you whilst having also got into the player's head, because Real Madrid are very, very good at doing that. They're very, very good at doing that. They're the best in the world at doing that. So, yeah, again, it's not a problem today, but it could be a problem tomorrow and in the not too distant future. What else have we got in the live chat? Inner Circle says, it is inevitable. I do not see Saliba signing a new contract anytime soon. Even winning trophies won't stop him going. It might not, because, you know, some players have their careers in their heads all mapped out. He might think, I want to be at Real Madrid by the time I'm 27, 28, so that I can finish my career there. He might prefer Madrid to London. He might feel that that's the next step. Some people want new challenges. There are players that you just kind of get that aura from. I don't know if I feel that with William Saliba, if I'm being honest, so I don't want to sort of paint him with that brush. But, like, let's take Erling Haaland, right? His dad's got a connection to Manchester City. He's come there. He's ripped it up. Absolutely killed it. But I don't look at Erling Haaland and think that guy is going to be at Manchester City for the rest of his career. I do honestly believe, like in his career to date, he's got moves already planned out. You know, he knew from Salzburg that he wanted to make the move to somewhere like Dortmund before he made that next step into, for example, the Premier League with Manchester City. And he did exactly that. For all the talk of young players not being very switched on and clued up and sometimes making bad decisions, there are a lot of stars out there that have great people around them, great people advising them, and do map out their careers in they want. And invariably, because they're so good, they can make that happen. And he's another one of those. He is another one of those for me, William Saliba, whereby seems like he's switched on, seems like he's got his head screwed on, and it seems like he will make the best decisions for himself along the way. Guys, if I could just ask quickly, please leave a like on the channel. On the video. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. If you're new and if you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review. Remember, I can't even talk today. Remember, those reviews really, really do help us. And we lost a bunch on Apple Podcasts. So if you could help us build them back up, I'd be really, really grateful for that. Kwame says, do you think he's a better defender than Gabriel? Yeah. But I don't think there's as much in it as some people would have you believe. I think they're both supremely talented centre-backs that both bring out the best in one another. You've got in Gabriel, and I know I've said this before, you've got that aggressor that goes and steps forward, that will throw his body at things, that will be just that little bit more fired up at times. And then you've got the cooler, calmer head in William Saliba. And the two balance each other out. I think you do need the intensity in a backline that Gabriel brings, and you need the calm that Saliba brings. And that's why I think as a pairing, they work really, really well. They balance one another out. Gabriel's great. And I disagree when people say, well, Saliba's miles ahead of him. I don't believe that. But Saliba looks tidier. Saliba looks, and I don't mean in his appearance, I mean in the way that he plays the game. Saliba looks calmer. Saliba looks like the Rolls Royce of centre-backs, if that makes sense. And that makes him really, really appealing. He's also a fair bit younger than Gabriel as well. I think there's 3 or 4 years between them. 3 probably. Which obviously means that William Saliba is a much more attractive proposition to those sides that would be looking to buy him. Yes, he'd probably cost more as a result of that. But with Gabriel, you'd probably be a bit reluctant to pay north of 100 million, even though I think he's worth that to us. But you'd probably be reluctant to pay that because he's 3-4 years further down the line in his career. The Masked Cannon says Harry Saliba was an Arsenal fan in his childhood. I reckon he'll still go in a couple of years, but he was an Arsenal fan from young because of Henry. Yeah, but like we hear these stories a lot. Like, oh, I love this club from when I was a kid. I think you could take an interest in a club from a distance. And I'm not saying you can't be a fan of the club when you live miles and miles away, because this community is proof of that. We've got listeners, viewers who are diehard Arsenal fans who love the club just as much as I do, who lives 5 miles away than they do who lives a couple of thousand miles away, right? So we're all equal in that sense. But there are clubs that I, as a kid, grew up admiring. AC Milan is a big example of that. There are clubs that I grew up admiring from a distance. I would never go as far as saying I supported them, but I admired them. I kept my eye on them. That great Barcelona team under Pep Guardiola was another side that I hugely, hugely admired growing up. Didn't support them, but admired them. And I feel like sometimes when players sign for clubs, they overplay the association that they had growing up with that football club because they know it's what the fans want to hear. They know it makes for a great story. They know it sounds romantic and all the rest of it. And I just find it hard to believe that all of these people that signed for Arsenal over the last few years grew up avidly supporting Arsenal. I feel like there's a bit of a spin on those stories to make the story itself, if you like, more appealing and more positive. So yeah, I'm reluctant to believe that sometimes. Gary Griffin says they don't spend massive fees on players and he would not be cheap even with 1 year left on his deal. Can you see Madrid paying 120 million plus for him? I don't. They will switch once the price is too high. Yes, but they could do what I mentioned a little bit earlier on. Get in his ear from now. Get in his ear from now. And when that contract renewal comes around in probably 2025, 2026, because Arsenal won't want to let it run down to the final year, if they're in his head saying, look, you still ain't won the Premier League, you still ain't won the Champions League, you can win it all here at the Santiago Bernabeu, you can win it all, then does that make him think twice about signing the contract? So Real Madrid have this incredible power of influencing things, even indirectly at times. Even when they don't have the power, they do, if that makes sense. But yeah, we'll see how that develops and how that goes. Guys, I'm going to love you and leave you. Thank you so much. We've only got 46 likes on the board, which is nowhere near good enough at the time of the live stream. Come on, help me out here. It's the international break. I really need you guys to keep my numbers close to where they should be. There's always a drop-off during the international break, but it would be a massive, massive help if you could support me in that. Leave me a review, all the rest of it. And I will see you all on the next episode, which will be tomorrow, Friday morning. I don't know what we're going to discuss yet because I don't know what's going to happen. Remember, you can check out the Patreon pod where you can find our In Focus episodes, the latest of which is a piece on Gabriel Jesus and his form. I say I don't know what we're going to talk about tomorrow. We will probably touch on the England-Greece game because I'll be there tonight and it makes sense. And if Greece get a positive result, especially, it's one I'll definitely want to talk about. But we'll see on that tomorrow. Stay tuned, like, subscribe, all the rest of it. Thank you so much for your continued support, guys. Have a great rest of your Thursday and I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.